further ado, Maggie Wagner.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are y'all?
Good.
Good. Well, I was going to say that Rick basically gave my lesson when he talked about the fog and the clearing, and then we had the light of mine and the shining of our internal lights. But I'll go ahead and talk to you guys for a few minutes. Why not? So, have you ever had an opportunity where you had to plan out something? You thought you knew exactly what it is that you were going to do, like a project or this thing. Let me know if you can't hear me at any point because it will. Okay. A project or a talk or something that you needed to do. It could have been something small, it could be something huge, and it just doesn't come together. And that really happened to me this week. I thought I was going to come to you guys and talk about what your story is. And I had it in my mind, planned out, thinking how we pick up a story that's happened, the appearance of what's been going on in our life past, and it plays again into the future. But as I was trying to get together what it was, how to articulate that and relate it to a Bible story and give you the metaphysics, I was just met with a brick wall over and over. And I realized that it was because I had a lot going on with me this last week. And my energy and my mental faculties and my spiritual power was being poured into something that required my attention at the immediate moment. And it sure wasn't talking to you about the story because I was living my story. But I was also doing what it was that was mine to do at that time. So instead of forcing the talk and the energy, I stopped and I listened. And I found out that what I was dealing with and how I was dealing with that might be more relatable to you guys. So, in recognizing that I was dealing with and doing what was mine to do at that moment, I immediately went to the story of Lazarus. I know Lazarus is probably not something that comes to mind when you're thinking, this is mine to do, right? Is everybody familiar with the story of Lazarus? I don't think so. Okay, so I'm going to recap it. Ready? So Jesus was hanging out in Bethany. He was doing his thing, elevating consciousnesses and healing people. And he got word that his best friend was sick. Not only was this his best friend, but it was the brother to Martha and Mary. Mary of Mary Magdalene, some may think, who was lover or maybe even the wife to Jesus. So not only was it his best friend, but it is possibly, that's a story for another time, but quite possibly the woman of the best friend was tapping her toe and saying, hey, my brother's sick, come and do your thing, Jesus. And he didn't run off. He was in the middle of doing what it is that he was doing at that moment. He didn't drop everything. He was tending to people. He was in process of things going on. But he took the message and he took the time to derive a plan. He even took a long sleep to get clear. And then he consulted his disciples and said, let us go unto Judea again. And the good disciples that they were said, are you sure? Because last time we were there, the Jews tried to stone you to death. And Jesus, in his Jesus way, said, yeah, I know, but it's the right thing to do. I'm going to try and spare you the yesists and goists as much as possible and give this to you just as plain as I can. So they set off. Jesus traveled with an entourage. It wasn't ever easy just to pick up and get on a donkey and go. He had to gather the disciples and their wives and all it took. And they got off on their path and headed to Judea. And Martha met them outside the city, probably knowing that there was going to be some meeting of resistance because the crowds were gathered, but also because she was ticked And she ran out to Jesus and she said, if you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. Lazarus wouldn't have died. My brother wouldn't be dead. And Jesus said, thy brother will rise again. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet he shall live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believeth thou this? I couldn't get away from the thous and believeth. And she said, yes, I believe it. So onward they went. And as expected, there were a mass of Jews. This was the time. Somebody had died. And they may just be waiting for the show. But everybody was gathered around Martha and Mary because they lost their loved one. And so Jesus and entourage arrive at the house where Mary was, and repeat scene. Mary comes out and throws herself down and said, Lord, hast thou been here? My brother had not died. And repeat, did you know who I am? Do you believe? Relax. We got this. And so Mary was weeping, and the Jews were weeping, and the Bible says this, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came around her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Groaned. It was not like in the scene. And then he asked where they had laid him. And then Jesus wept. And the Jews said, oh, look at how he loved him. Oh, this is awesome. Look at how he loved him. And then he said, let's go. Show me where he is. Let's go to the cave. And again, groaning, he said unto himself, Jesus therefore again, groaning in himself, cometh to the grave, and it was a cave a stone laid upon it. And he looked at the crowd and said, all right, roll away the stone. And the sisters said, my Lord, he stinketh. He's been dead for 4 days. And it was no matter, because this was the process. At this point, Jesus lifted his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee thou hast heard me. And I know that thou hast heard me always, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they believe that thou hast sent me. So at this point, he's aligning himself with the divine. He's giving the thanks, ready to know that it's going to be so. And he gets centered, and he says in a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound in hands and feet in grave cloths, and his face was bound in a napkin. And Jesus said, loose him and let him go. That's it in Cliff's Notes version. But it's a two-part story, represented by the two major characters. So there's Jesus and there's Lazarus, and I'll start with Jesus because it's Jesus and it's the right thing to do. So Jesus wasn't the only trick in town. He wasn't the only person rolling around, raising the dead and spontaneously healing people. But he didn't refer Mary or Martha or anybody else out. He didn't outsource the job. He wasn't excited about it, but he knew that it was his to do. But it didn't keep him from procrastinating. He didn't jump on the camel and gather everybody up and trot off. Bethany wasn't even that far away. If you look at the map, I can estimate that we're not even talking a whole day's journey. So it wasn't that he didn't want to go. It wasn't the coordination of the whole entourage that was causing the delay of getting on the road. He simply wasn't ready. First, he finished what he was in the middle of doing, and the second, he rested and gathered his forces in devising a plan. It is my belief that he knew that he was taking the first steps to his crucifixion story. So let's not forget about Lazarus. He died. And he was dead. He was good dead for 4 days. The Bible says that he was stinking dead. Stinking dead. The revealing word says this about death. It says that it's a sleep. Death is but a prolonged sleep, the result of thought and harmony so great that the body cannot stand the strain and collapses. Then, instead of being in a body when he wakes, man finds that he is in the realm of thought without a vehicle, adequate for his full expression, and he is forced by divine law to build again. So, to translate that, it's conflict. It's being in such misalignment of thought and truth that there's such separation between appearances and the true divine nature that we are, that all energies are spent, and you simply cannot continue. Now, in the story, Lazarus died, but this can look other than death or sleep. We can appear to be stuck in a job that we may or may not hate, but it's not fulfilling, or in a relationship that's no longer serving us. Rather, it would be draining us. It's a feeling of confusion and lack of direction, and it looks something like acceptance. Like we're not moving forward, so the action of not moving is accepting, even though it might suck. It's a swirl of conflicting thoughts, and emotions that detach us from the essence of the divine indwelling spirit within us. And it looks like the darkness. So last time I was here, we talked about darkness. And it's where we must be willing to go to sort things out and allow for the silence and allow for the work that happens in the silence. Being in the darkness can and often does for most of us mean that we're still putting one foot in front of the other. We're still going through the motions of life. But it also looks a lot like The Walking Dead or sleepwalking. You're just plodding one foot in front of the other, but in the back of your mind, you may be processing and thinking, even if you're thinking, I hate this job. Every time you are thinking that, you're also somewhere envisioning the alternative to the feeling that is leading to the thought, I hate this job. So you're creating in that darkness. And we're walking around, and we're shrouded in those heavy thoughts. And we are sorting, and we're visioning, and we are using, and maybe even all consumed by those mental faculties. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be so heavy in your life and still have to carry forward the responsibilities that are expected of you. And I'm sure you do too. So poor Lazarus. And this man was in such conflict that his mental and physical turmoil, that he just collapsed. And first, he just came downhill. It stopped him in his tracks. And I think this was probably his first attempt at creating space and the silence for him to get clear and work some things out, to reconnect with the divine and figure out what it was that he was actually supposed to be doing. So this is a process, and I referenced a book called The Lazarus Blueprint by Mary Alice and Richard DeFolla. So I'm going to walk you through the 6 steps in summary the way I see them from that book and from the story. So step 1 is going within. As I said, this is the first attempt to go into the darkness and not die. And when that isn't enough, in this story, he did die. Lazarus literally had to take the most severe step to reconnect with the Father. This is the darkness, and going within, it's reconnecting with the indwelling, the divine that has access to all of the 12 powers, including those of wisdom, faith, order, imagination, life, and renunciation. I picked those for a reason, so just stick with me. Step 2, when you're ready, roll away the stone. This is conviction. So you've been in the darkness and sorted it out. And when you then you're convicted. You know that this is what you're going to do. So with that action and with that power, you roll away the roadblocks that are keeping you from your path and from doing what is yours to do. So you're clearing the path and you get ready to get moving. Step 3, Rick called it, have faith. There are not always things are not always as they appear. Our five senses are scanning constantly to feed us back information. But as human beings, we are extremely limited. This was a tidbit that was in the book. The human eye can only see objects that reflect light waves between infrared and ultraviolet, and that's only a mere 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum, which means that 99% of what is actually going on around us goes without being seen. So never mind your senses out here, your touching and your tasting and your smelling and your hearing. That's extremely limited as well. I'll spare you the scientific tidbit on those, but rest assured that faith comes into play. Seeing is not believing. And we have to know that things are happening at all times on our behalf, that this is divine order. So by now you've been in the darkness and cleared the path. So have faith that all is good and all is right and all is coming together just as it should. In step 4, giving thanks. The universe responds to appreciation. Though we may not know what is going on or exactly how it's going to look when it's done, we must have an attitude of gratitude. For the universe responds to this. It's God energy, and we continue to respond in a forward motion. So just as much as we want validation that we are on the right track and we're doing what we're supposed to do, by being thankful, the universe knows that we're still willing. And step 5, the strong commandment. This is declaring what is yours. The power of the spoken word has a physical vibration that is felt within the body, and then it's released out to the universe. In the story, it says, he cried in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. He wasn't meek or mild or timid about it. He wasn't like, all right, man, if you're ready, I think we're good. Come on out. No, Jesus had done the work, and he was aligned with the Father, and he'd given thanks, and the declaration was made. So at that point, he knew it was so. Lazarus' role, our role, is being realigned with the Christ and the divine nature that is able to be awakened, rise from the dead, and reclaim the vehicle that had been previously given to him. He was an exception, because if you die, you typically get put into a new vehicle, but Lazarus got his own back. This is also what we would probably equate to rising from the ashes. So you've been through it. At this point, I'm going to recap because step 6 is the big step. You've gone within and connected with the indwelling divine. You've used your imagination and have understanding to know what is yours to do. You've identified the obstacles, and using wisdom, he or we have gotten through all of the yeah buts and clearly know what it is that we need to get over or under or around to get to our true path. He had faith, therefore he had faith in himself, so therefore he had faith in God. And everything was happening in divine order, whether it could be seen or felt or not. And he was grateful in advance for God and for all of the support that was happening all around him, keeping in mind his highest good. And he came alive. This is the power of life. He got up, though his hands and feet were bound, and his face was bound, and he was able to get to the opening of the tomb. He was the embodiment of life itself. So last step is step 6, and this is the hardest one. It's dropping the old role. Jesus said, unbind him and let him go. Quite literally, this is releasing the old bindings, the old limitations, the old vision of self, and everything that came in restriction with that. Releasing the past is being able to step forward into the new that you have created. It's releasing the old us. Until you've taken this step in the process, it's not complete. If you are bound, though you are awakened, you still have not come alive until you are free of your old identity. The thing is that whatever has made us the person that we were, or put us in that job, or landed us in that relationship, that all took time. That was also a process, and it imprinted on us, and it dug grooves into the psyche of our being. It was a learned behavior, and it took time to create that image, so it takes time to recreate the image of who we are. So this process takes diligence, and it takes focus to stay connected. Those old habits of self-interaction, they'll sneak in on you. And where you are not paying attention and allow for them to sneak in, where you allow for them not to sneak in, let me say this. If you are not guardian of your own creation of who you are, others will be glad to remind you of who you were. They will sing you your old song gladly because it's comfortable for them. When you're doing something for you and you're recreating you and you're stepping out onto your path and your faith and who you are and you're shining bright for that alignment within, it's going to make others uncomfortable. And they will be happy in their discomfort to remind you of how small you were playing at one point. There's an analogy in the book that I love and I couldn't leave it out. It says, would you put on a brand new outfit and then put your old clothes over it? Or would you drive your car backwards? So stepping forward and standing in strong faith, knowing, connected, is your job, but it does take the diligence. Your appearance out of the cave and into the life scene is announcing to the world, this is a brand new you. This is what I'm doing. And the announcement comes not by way of walking around and saying it, but it comes by your actions. You're walking the walk. So, we don't know what it was that he was to do. After this story, we never heard another word from Lazarus. This was, however, the final preceding story to the steps that led to the crucifixion story of Jesus. Being willing to do what is ours to do isn't always easy. Almost never is it easy. So I'll go back to the part in the story where Jesus wept. When he wept, he wasn't crying for Lazarus or doubting his own divinity. He was weeping for the fact of knowing that this was the first step to the end of his physical existence on earth. Beyond the story is everybody who bared witness and stood there in awe and amazement at his talents and the representation of true syncing with the divine didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know if they should keep him for himself or run to the high priest and get, I'm telling him that you just pulled a dead man out of the tomb. And he knew that there was a possibility. He knew it. And of course, they were afraid and they were thinking small, and so they told. Neither stepping up or transformation is easy. Sometimes it does take a complete overhaul, a total transformation of self to be able to do what is ours to do. We don't know what Lazarus was going to be doing, but apparently it was big because he had to die in order to really get clear and focused. We all have the tools and the power to act accordingly to the whispers within our hearts, to the nudge, to the God that is pushing us forward. And we can listen, or we can spend our energies trying not to listen, but either way is going to win. Either way, you're going to fall ill or die, walking dead, or you're going to be productive in your energy and moving that forward. We all are capable of stepping up and showing up exactly as we need to, and to do exactly what we've been here to come. Come here to be. There you go. We just need to listen, and we must be willing to do so. So let's take these thoughts into meditation.